4068 is essentially SB 12 Amendment 5 and it's a compromise position between Republicans and Democrats that started in the Senate. Is that correct?
That's correct. And this is, Senate Bill 12 was actually an extension of the working group negotiations that had happened in the prior year. And so there has been an extensive amount of give and take on House Bill 4068 that has occurred over the last year and a half, 2 years, that began with the working groups and then went into negotiations between, I believe, Republican senators and Senate Democrats.
I can't just let that go as true. So, Mr. Shattuck, as you know, Representative Raoul did not call that bill. He called Senate Bill 2525. It was not agreed. If it was agreed, he would have called that bill. Please proceed, Representative.
Everything that we've been told on our side of the aisle is that this was a deeply committed compromise between the two agencies before all talks broke down. And it is interesting because as much as people like to say 2525 does something, the truth is, in my opinion, what we've heard is that business is okay with 4068, but it doesn't even go as far as business wanted it to go, but they're willing to take 4068, while as 2525 is absolutely a non-starter with business. Is that correct?
I do not believe there was a single business group that is in support of House Bill 2525. And in fact, I think there were a number of business groups and businesses that opposed House Bill 2525 as it's moving through the process and on concurrence here in the House. 4068, my understanding is that it does have support of many of the business groups, including the Illinois Chamber.
Okay. However, it's a compromise bill. It's not what the Chamber has wanted in the past, or even that we think is going to get us everywhere we need to go on work comp, but it is a compromise, correct?
Certainly. That was in my testimony, yes, sir, at the beginning.
And I believe that our goal here is mainly to bring us to about average in state rates across the United States. So we're not looking to be Indiana, for example, on workers' compensation rates. We're looking to be average.
Correct.
Okay, and I think that that's what we believe this bill will get us, is simply down to average rather than maybe the 8th highest. Okay, the other thing I'd like to address, because I don't think it's really been talked about much, is whether or not this item is connected to the Illinois budget. Obviously, we're here to focus on the budget, and is this a budgetary item or not? So I know you guys represent budget here, and it's unfortunately we don't have anybody from the not-for-profit sector or government sector to really stand up and address this issue. But I'd like to read into the record a letter that was sent by Lisa Madigan in her official capacity as the Attorney General of the state of Illinois. And she wrote this in April of 2012, and it is concerning workers' compensation. And she says, "Dear President Cullerton, Speaker Madigan, Leader Adonio, and Leader Cross," who was the leader at that time, the minority leader, "when you return to Springfield next week, I urge you to consider further reforms to the workers' compensation law. As the attorneys for the state in cases filed by state employees before the Illinois Workers' Compensation Commission, our office has worked to limit the state's liability whenever possible. The current law and the decisions interpreting the law, however, make it extremely difficult for employers, including the state, to successfully defend these cases and limit the costs. The reforms that the General Assembly passed last spring," that would be the 2011 reforms we keep discussing, "made important and necessary improvements to the law, but further changes are needed. I've enclosed a memorandum providing an analysis of the issues impacting the state's defense of these cases and detailing the most significant difficulties that we face and the reforms we believe are necessary." Signed by Lisa Madigan. So even after the 2011 reforms, the fact that this is a budgetary item is very obvious in her note imploring the leaders to do something additional on workers' compensation because it's costing the state and government employers an inordinate amount of money. This is not from some right-wing radical government manager. This is from the Lisa Madigan, the Office of the Attorney General. Now, at the time that she wrote this letter, I think it's important to note that they had nearly 21,000 open cases on workers' compensation. That was about 1 claim per 3 employees. Additionally, of those claims, 5,000 of those claims were brought up post-retirement. So folks who had already left state employment, 5,000 of the claims, they did not even file on the job. They filed it after they had already left work, and some of them by substantial time frames. So the fact that this isn't a budgetary item is completely false. So we've already established that it's a budgetary item when you look at the state and government employers. It's also a budgetary item when you look at not-for-profits, because we know that a number of not-for-profits have seen their costs for workers' compensation triple and quadruple in just the last 10 years. Now, why is that a cost on a budgetary item? Because many of those not-for-profits provide services that the state pays for. And the more workers' compensation costs them, and sometimes for needless claims that they need to settle just to be done with it as well, the less services that they can provide to people. And I'm talking people in the disability community, people in the aging community, people who really need state services, so our money doesn't go as far. The final reason this is a budgetary item is because it affects private employers. And private employers, we do not, listen, if they don't make a revenue and we don't get taxes from that revenue, we don't get taxes. So the more profitable our private employers are in a reasonable manner, the better off we are. And what we need here are really good middle income jobs. That's what we're about here. And while we've seen expansion maybe in the high-tech sector or financial sector, we have lost it in terms of the manufacturing sector. And let me just give you a couple quick examples. So Hoist Lift Truck Manufacturing is one of the nation's largest forklift manufacturers. The company used to make machines in Illinois, but no longer. Hoist employs about 300 workers at its new Indiana facility and plans to hire 250 more by the end of the year. The average pay for one of those jobs is $55,000. Moving a massive manufacturing operation is no easy task, so what forced Hoist's hand? Poor public policy. Without Illinois' highest in the region workers' compensation costs and the highest property taxes in the nation, CEO Marty Flaska said he never would have considered moving. But that move saved them $1 million in their first year on workers' compensation costs alone. $1 million. So that's one example. The next example is that Hoist is really essentially not alone. Located just outside of Ford Heights, one of the poorest areas of Illinois, J. Armstrong has been running a small manufacturing business since 2001. Trialco provides nearly 60 jobs for the surrounding community in South Cook County, making alloys for other manufacturers. But Trialco's future in Illinois is in jeopardy. Armstrong puts the odds at 50-50 that he moves his manufacturing business to Indiana. And those odds are getting worse each year. We are ready to do an expansion, but our owner is questioning us. How could we expand in the state of Illinois when it would be about $400,000 or $500,000 cheaper to move to Indiana? One of the primary reasons, workers' compensation costs. So that's 2 examples from around the state. I'll talk to you about a third one, and that was the Office Max, Office Depot takeover or coming together of those 2 companies. So they were making a decision: do we stay in Illinois, or do we go to Florida? And in the meeting, when they talked about give us one line item that would cause you to move to Florida over Illinois. And the item brought up was workers' compensation costs. Here in our state, it would cost them about $2.5 million a year. In Florida, it costs them about $600,000. That's a $1.9 million cost to that company for 1 year. They chose Florida. So I'm not an expert on workers' comp, but I can read and I can see what's happening. And the truth is that these are budgetary items because when we lose good jobs, then we lose the ability to have people here that are productive taxpayers as well. Let's just drill this down a little bit more because we know that in 2012, Caterpillar CEO Doug Oberhelm authored an op-ed specifically warning Illinois' work comp rates were driving good-paying middle-class manufacturing jobs from the state. And sure enough, we've seen Caterpillar shed thousands of jobs from around the state. But when we talk specifically about manufacturing, we should know that since 2012, Iowa has kept its manufacturing jobs even. Missouri's increased by 3%, Minnesota and Ohio by 4%, Indiana manufacturing jobs increased 7%, Kentucky and Tennessee by 9%. Michigan has increased its manufacturing jobs by 13%. At that same time, Illinois has lost another 2% of their manufacturing jobs. So that's a budgetary item when you have businesses not here, when you have folks not able to get jobs and contribute to the economy, and these are great jobs. While they may start at about 50,000, I know the Illinois Manufacturers Association is going to be here. They're saying that many of those jobs you can make upwards of 80,000 plus. And so I want to address that. I want to address that, first of all, this is a compromise bill. Second of all, it is a budget item. And third, I just wanted to go back to one other thing. And when we're talking about insurance rates, and I would like to talk to the insurance folks up out there at the table there, would you say the insurance industry is fairly heavily regulated already?
It's extensively regulated, yes.
Okay, and when you're pricing insurance rates, essentially you're looking at the risk involved with the claims that are going to happen. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And some of the things that would be real big cost drivers for claims would be a causation standard, which we have. There's really no causation standard in Illinois. Is that correct?
Well, what drives rates are the underlying costs. So anything that drives costs drives the rates. It's that simple. Okay,
so, but you could say that having a more modest causation standard would maybe help on the cost side. However, ours is if 1% of it was caused by work, 100% of the claim is given out in work. Is that correct?
I would say our causation standard adds to the cost of workers' compensation claims in Illinois.
Okay, but, and I bring that up because we're not changing causation standards at all in 4068, are we? We're not touching it.
No, there's no change.
That's right. And would you say that benefit payouts would be a part of the problem with increased costs as well?
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
So if you have very generous benefit payouts, that can the level of benefit payouts can also increase or decrease costs, correct?
Yes, absolutely. Sorry.
And we don't believe that we're changing benefits at all in this bill.
The actual rate at which benefits are paid other than a freeze are not changed at all, no.
Okay, that's right. And certainly if you are expecting as an insurance company to have more litigious claims, that would be a cost driver as well.
Yeah, yes, it tends to be. Yes.
And we're not really affecting anything on the legal side as well in 4068.
Not dramatically, no.
Okay, so many of the things, so what we're doing is we're asking for reasonable, I would say, very much a compromise, and we haven't hit some of the biggest cost drivers. We're just trying to get our insurance rates down to average in the United States.
That's the direction. I think that's the intent of the bill, and the inclusion of a drug formulary and the Medicare-based fee schedule help drive it in that direction, yes.
Thank you very much. That's all I have.